Unova feels different from every region that came before it. Its air carries the rhythm of motion, the quiet hum of trains, the glow of city skylines, and the whisper of waves meeting the edge of Castilia's docks. Long before the lights of the metropolis ever reflected in the water, these lands were home to stories of balance and separation. Ancient legends say that two brothers once ruled together, sharing a single truth that later split into opposing ideals. One believed the world could only progress through truth, while the other believed it could only grow through dreams. When their hearts divided, so did the dragon they commanded, splitting into two beings whose flames and lightning would echo through time. It is said that even now, when a storm crosses Unova and lightning meets fire on the horizon, the air vibrates with their lingering argument. Unova was the first region designed to feel foreign, inspired by a place far from Japan. Its cities drew directly from New York, bridges arching like those of Brooklyn, parks stretching across the skyline, and avenues that never truly slept. The developers wanted players to feel distance, not just in geography, but in spirit, as though they were stepping into a modern world that had evolved far beyond the quiet forests of Kanto or the volcanic roots of Hoenn. This new setting demanded new Pokémon, and nearly every species introduced here was created from scratch, breaking the tradition of repeating older designs. The result was a region that felt alive, crowded, and unfamiliar in the best way. The central hub of Unova, Castelia City, stands as one of the most ambitious locations ever built in a mainline Pokémon game. Its skyscrapers were textured with hundreds of windows, each reflecting real-time light shifts that changed with the day. To achieve this illusion of depth, developers hand-painted reflections for every building, giving the impression that unseen lives continued behind each window pane. Even the harbor below moves in gentle rhythm with the player's steps, simulating the slight sway of water as though the city itself were breathing. Long before Castelia became a city of glass and steel, the desert east of it was already ancient. The relic castle still lies buried beneath layers of golden dust, hiding secrets from a time when humans and Pokémon were not yet separate. According to in-game lore, it was once ruled by a king who sought to understand life's essence and use the energy of the desert to preserve his companions beyond mortality. The walls are said to whisper in sandstorms, not voices, but faint movements of memory carried by wind. In contrast to its ruins, the region's roots burst with technology. The Sky Arrow Bridge was one of the first structures designed with full three-dimensional depth, stretching longer than any bridge before it in a Pokémon world. Its shape was modeled after real suspension bridges of New York, and the camera pan that reveals it upon crossing remains one of the most memorable transitions in series history. The music there uses only a handful of instruments, blending soft percussion and wind chimes to create a sense of awe rather than energy. For many players, it was the first time a route felt cinematic, a place meant not for battle, but for reflection. Among Unova's most mysterious species, Victini carries the title of the Victory Pokémon. Hidden away on Liberty Garden, its island lighthouse is a quiet monument to something older than the city surrounding it. The lighthouse was modeled to evoke a feeling of isolation, an island of peace surrounded by modern chaos. In lore, it is said that the Pokémon's flame never extinguishes because it is not powered by heat, but by will. The developers confirmed that its number, 0, in the regional Pokédex was intentional, a symbol of beginnings rather than endings. One of the most symbolic Pokémon introduced in this region was Zoroark. Its illusion ability was born from the developer's wish to represent deception not as malice, but as defense. The Pokémon's lore describes it as fiercely protective of its kind, using illusion to ward off danger rather than seek advantage. In its debut movie, its transformation sequences were animated using fluid simulation techniques borrowed from special effects software, one of the earliest uses of film technology in a Pokemon project. Another detail hidden in plain sight is the design of Braviary, a Pokemon directly inspired by the bald eagle but given an extra layer of symbolism. Its red, white, and blue coloring mirrors the American flag, yet its story draws from the ideal of freedom, not in conquest, but in loyalty. Its Pokédex describes it as willing to fight for its friends, even at the cost of its own safety, embodying the paradox of strength born from compassion. Unova's Pokédex entries often carry poetic undertones, speaking in metaphor rather than data. One example is the entry for Litwick, describing it as guiding souls to the afterlife while feeding on their life energy. The imagery is macabre, yet the candle's small size and soft animation create a strange gentleness. In early drafts, the flame was drawn blue instead of purple, but artists changed it after noticing that purple light cast a more soothing glow against dark environments, a subtle decision that shaped the tone of the ghost-type designs in later games. The developers of Unova were particularly focused on contrast, cities and nature, truth and ideals, life and technology. Even the musical compositions reflect this philosophy. N's Castle, for instance, was the first location in the series to feature a live choir in its soundtrack. The chanting voices were layered over synthetic strings to create the feeling of an ancient order hidden within a modern fortress. Every note was written in minor key to suggest reverence rather than evil, reinforcing that N's motives were rooted in sincerity, not villainy. Driftvale City remains one of the most musically distinct towns in the series. Its theme draws from jazz and blues, with a walking bass line that subtly detunes as it loops. This imperfection was intentional, a nod to the human element of music, echoing the city's balance between industry and art. Its creator once stated that the theme was meant to sound like a heartbeat through a harmonica, reflecting how the town thrives on rhythm and labor. Unova's gym leaders each embody aspects of its culture. Clay, for instance, was modeled after a Texas oil magnate, but his demeanor was shaped by rural humility rather than greed. His name wasn't just a reference to Earth, it symbolized the foundation of progress, both literally and spiritually. Skyla, the Mistralton gym leader, was the first to have a full three-dimensional takeoff sequence animated behind her battlefield. The designers wanted her to represent freedom of motion, which is why her battle theme modulates key mid-combat, the only gym leader track in Unova to do so. Even the small, quiet towns of Unova hide intricate meaning. In Nuvema, the first town, the soundtrack features faint birdsong that changes subtly depending on time of day, a first for the handheld series. This was done to simulate natural circadian rhythm and immerse players in the region's living world. The house lights also dim gradually at night instead of instantly, mimicking how electricity behaves in rural settings. The Pokemon themselves mirror the region's modernity. Clink's design, 3 rotating gears that evolve into increasingly complex machinery, was originally a sketch of interconnected train wheels. When the design team saw how naturally it spun, they shifted its concept from transportation to technology. Its mechanical animation in black and white was programmed by a single developer who spent weeks adjusting frame rates so the gears would appear to rotate smoothly despite hardware limits. Gothitelle, another standout from this region, was designed to embody the aesthetic of a Victorian fortune teller, symbolizing humanity's fascination with the stars. Its lore mentions predicting the lifespans of others by reading starlight, but this is metaphorical. Developers clarified that it represents empathy, not omniscience. The glittering star field in its eyes was hand-drawn pixel by pixel with no repeat pattern, giving each sprite a unique gaze. The Ferris wheel in Nimbasa City was one of the most symbolic structures in the series. It was designed not just as scenery, but as a storytelling device. When the player rides it with N, the dialogue reflects philosophical tension between connection and control. The wheel's movement, perfectly circular and endless, symbolizes the cycle of misunderstanding that defines their ideology, a quiet, visual metaphor most players only feel subconsciously. In the desert, Yamask carries a mask that represents its former human face. The concept was inspired by ancient Egyptian funerary masks and a theme of identity loss. The same design team later confirmed that this Pokemon's creation led to the broader lore surrounding the connection between spirits and civilization. Its existence blurs the line between history and haunting, a perfect example of Unova's blend of myth and modernity. The two dragons that define Unova's myth are more than opposites. They are complements. Their energy patterns mirror each other perfectly. One emits electromagnetic waves, the other absorbs heat through plasma. When their cries are slowed down digitally, they harmonize in a perfect fifth interval, a deliberate composition choice by the audio team to suggest that even their conflict is musical. The third member of their trinity, the dragon that once embodied unity, hums at a frequency that bridges the gap between their tones, a sound that scientists in the game's lore describe as the heartbeat of ideals, is Wenlerati. Even the smallest details of Unova's design reflect this balance. The Pokemon Center and Pokemart were merged into one building for the first time here, a change meant to symbolize progress and unity. The architects of the region within the lore are said to have believed that convenience was the new kindness, and the games echoed that philosophy through design. The Dream World feature, once accessible through the global link, expanded the region's lore beyond the screen. The idea of entering the dreams of Pokemon was not just gameplay. It connected to the story's theme of ideals versus reality. Many species seen there, such as Muna and Musharna, were chosen for their symbolism, dream, thought, and consciousness intertwined. The music of the dream world plays at a tempo of exactly 60 beats per minute, intentionally matching the resting human heartbeat. As Unova's myths evolved, so did its people. The region's researchers studied how Pokemon and humans could coexist without domination, echoing N's philosophy in practical form. This cultural shift is reflected subtly in the games. The Pokédex entries focus more on emotion, cooperation, and understanding than fear or power. It marked the series' quiet transformation from cataloging creatures to listening to them. When viewed from above in concept art, the Unova map forms the shape of a spiral, a deliberate design symbolizing growth, connection, and the cyclical nature of truth and ideals. Each city represents a stage of progress, from the quiet beginnings of Nuvema to the illuminated towers of Castelia, and finally to the reflection and restoration seen in Opelucid. The entire region is a journey from innocence to awareness, a sleeping world gradually waking into harmony. And somewhere in that harmony lies the stillness Unova was always meant to represent. The idea that even in a land of steel and thunder, peace can be found not in silence, but in balance, Unova was designed around movement, not just the physical act of walking through routes, but the sense of the world moving with you. Every area feels alive, from the gentle push of the wind across Driftvale Bridge to the subtle sound of waves lapping beneath Sky Arrow. These details were not random, they were deliberate choices to make the player feel the scale of the world. When Game Freak first began designing the region, they studied how city dwellers experience nature, the way sound carries differently through buildings, how light bounces from glass instead of water. Unova became a place where humanity and Pokemon didn't just coexist, they adapted to one another's rhythm. The gym system reflects this balance perfectly. Each gym represents a small ecosystem of its own, with puzzles and designs inspired by the leader's philosophy rather than just their typing. The Striaton Trio were created to embody the region's starting choice, but more deeply, they represented cooperation, three individuals sharing one purpose. During development, the designers considered rotating their appearances randomly, but decided on a pattern to ensure players would meet the leader that reflected their starter's strength. Their teamwork became a quiet symbol of unity, a trait echoed in their restaurant's shared choreography and the way their battle music blends three overlapping themes into one. In contrast, Berg's Gym in Castelia is a living art piece. The honey walls were originally conceptualized as melted wax from candles in an artist's studio. The idea was to make the player feel like they were stepping into the creative process itself, walking through something fluid and constantly changing. The background buzz of Combi Wings was recorded using synthetic violin tremolos, giving the illusion of motion even in stillness. Elisa's Gym, meanwhile, became a fashion show, the first time a Pokemon battle arena doubled as a runway. The developers wanted to blend glamour and competition, showing how confidence itself could be a form of strength. Her gym's lights pulse in rhythm with the bass line of her theme, using dynamic sound syncing that was rare for the DS hardware. Even the color of the spotlights changes depending on the direction the player faces, creating a soft illusion of being inside a performance rather than an arena. Clay's Gym tells an opposite story, descent rather than elevation. The shifting elevators were built to represent mining and humility, forcing players to go downward to find strength rather than upward. Each elevator was animated to move with subtle inertia, swaying slightly as it stopped, a touch added after testers noted the movement felt too mechanical. The change made the gym feel heavier, more physical, and deeply grounded in its earthy theme. Skyla's Gym was the first to include a fully three-dimensional camera rotation during its canon sequences. The developers used an internal tool called Flight View, originally meant for cinematic cutscenes, to create the sense of soaring through the air. Her gym represents freedom, not chaos or speed, but the quiet calm that comes from release. The music's shifting tempo reflects wind currents, giving players the sensation of both lift and drift. Bryson's Gym near Isera City reflects isolation. Its ice floors are arranged in perfect symmetry, but the reflections are imperfect, slightly distorted to represent illusion and self-awareness. In interviews, the designers revealed that Bryson's character, an actor turned monk, mirrors the player's own journey, the search for meaning in repetition. Drayden's Gym in Opelucid changes aesthetic depending on the version of the game, a representation of truth and ideals embodied through architecture. One city is modern and bright, built of steel and glass, while the other is ancient, carved from stone. The dual versions symbolize not opposition, but evolution, showing that even the same truth can appear differently across perspectives. Unova's Elite Four chambers are among the most symbolic environments in the series. Chantal's library represents memory, books that contain the voices of the past, floating upward as if thought itself had become wind. Grimsley's staircase of cards and shadowed seats reflect the gamble of ambition, the idea that strength always carries risk. Caitlin's levitating room of calm light embodies reflection, literally rising above emotion. And Marshall's circular arena, surrounded by stone, is built like a meditation space, meant to ground the player before the challenge ahead. Each of these arenas uses a color temperature that mirrors its leader's spirit, creating emotional harmony through lighting alone. The Unova League itself was designed to resemble a cathedral. The stained glass windows project soft color shifts across the marble floor as the player walks, a detail almost imperceptible on the handheld screen but carefully rendered regardless. The structure's design was inspired by European halls of philosophy, places where debate, faith, and reason intertwined. For Unova, that symbolism fit perfectly. Truth and ideals meeting at the center, forever looping back into one another. Behind the region's grand design lies countless quiet choices that deepen its realism. The clouds that drift across routes are not random textures. They follow pre-coded wind paths that match the direction of local geography. The rivers flow at varying speeds depending on elevation, and the shadows in cities move slightly faster than those in forests, symbolizing the constant forward motion of human civilization. The Pokémon of Unova reflect this restless energy. Scrafty, for example, was designed to embody rebellion without cruelty, a creature of instinct rather than malice. Its sagging pants and confident posture were modeled after street fashion, meant to portray toughness as self-expression. The artists wanted players to see it not as a delinquent, but as a survivor of the streets it calls home. Conkeldurr, another fighting type from the region, carries concrete pillars not as weapons but as symbols of creation. Its name and design tie to construction workers, emphasizing that power is built, not inherited. The cracks on its pillars are intentional, representing imperfection embraced through experience. Sigilif, perhaps one of the most mysterious designs, is based on the Nazca lines, giant shapes carved into desert stone, visible only from above. Its constant circular flight pattern in-game mirrors how ancient cultures might have viewed divine symbols, motion as communication. The developers used a rhythmic animation loop of exactly 128 frames, a perfect multiple of the console's timing cycles, to make its flight appear infinite. Vanillux, a Pokémon often cited for its unusual concept, was designed to reflect the modern food culture of Unova's metropolis. Its evolution from simple ice cream to a multi-scoop tower represents the consumerism and indulgence of a society always reaching for more. The artist described it as a sweet that learned to survive winter, tying back into Unova's themes of adaptation and progress. Chandelure's creation stemmed from a fascination with how light guides both the living and the dead. Its flame burns souls, but its glow is warm, not harsh. The duality of this design, beauty and death coexisting, was meant to evoke the feeling of art that both comforts and unsettles. The animation of its flames was rendered using a mathematical sine wave instead of standard loops, making the movement organic, as though breathing. Even the region's plants tell stories. In Pinwheel Forest, the trees sway in alternating directions depending on player position, one of the first examples of perspective-based environment animation. The idea was to simulate the feeling of walking through living space rather than static scenery. The sunlight filtering through the leaves uses two overlapping transparency layers, one for wind and one for time of day, to give the illusion of dynamic life. Reshiram and Zekrom, the twin dragons of Unova, are more than mythic opposites. Their names come from the Japanese words for white and black light, Shiro and Kuro, yet their story isn't about color, but temperature. One represents the warmth of belief, the other the cold of truth. The creators deliberately gave them inverted eyes, the warm one with blue, the cold one with red, symbolizing how each sees the world through the other's essence. The third dragon that connects them completes the cycle, existing as balance rather than conflict. Its design draws inspiration from yin-yang geometry, and even the sound of its cry mirrors an electronic heartbeat. In the games, when it fuses with either of the others, its theme music merges their instruments, electric distortion meeting orchestral strings to represent unity through difference. Pokémon Black and White were also the first titles to have distinct Pokédex descriptions between versions, a reflection of the region's philosophy. Each version presents slightly different truths, encouraging players to recognize that no perspective is absolute. This storytelling technique subtly ties gameplay into the larger theme of duality. Every truth depends on the lens through which it's seen. N's name itself was chosen to represent the mathematical constant of potential. N is a variable, standing for any number, any possibility. His character arc mirrors the scientific process, hypothesis, challenge, and conclusion through empathy. His conversations with the player are deliberately written to avoid moral closure, leaving the audience to define truth for themselves. Hidden throughout, Unova are echoes of its predecessors. Trainers reference regions like Johto and Hoenn not as legends, but as neighboring nations, suggesting that for the first time, the Pokémon world is expanding politically as well as geographically. This concept would later influence how later generations built interconnected worlds, with Unova standing as the first region to feel part of a global system. Even the way the game transitions between environments reinforces its realism. The camera shifts angle when entering buildings, showing the player from above as though viewed through security footage. The design team used this perspective to evoke urban surveillance, the idea that in Unova's dense modern world, everyone is both seen and unseen at once. Unova's Pokémon League concludes not with destruction, but renewal. After the climactic battle, the ruins of N's castle merge with nature over time, becoming a symbol of rebirth rather than defeat. It's one of the few final locations in Pokémon history that grows quieter after the story ends, a deliberate narrative choice to let the player rest. And in that stillness lies the spirit of Unova itself, a place that hums with motion yet rests in reflection, a world built not on chaos or perfection, but on the truth that both light and shadow belong to the same rhythm. When the main story of Unova comes to rest, the region doesn't grow quiet, it exhales. The postgame opens paths that feel like half-forgotten dreams, corners of the map that were always waiting just beyond sight. In the black and white versions, the White Forest and Black City stand as living reflections of each other. One thrives with nature, overflowing with grass and calm music that fades into open air. The other hums with machinery and commerce, its streets echoing with metallic footsteps. The two were designed to show how growth can take two shapes, organic or industrial, and neither is villainous. The trees of the forest sway with a slower rhythm than the lights that blink in the city, but both pulse to the same hidden beat of Unova's balance. Even the way these areas change over time reflects the player's journey. The population of Black City can vanish if neglected, while the White Forest can wither into stillness. The developers wanted to make progress feel alive, not permanent, but responsive. The world remembers how it's treated. The Royal Unova cruise ship rests in Castilia's harbor as another kind of reflection. It leaves at evening, circles the ocean, and returns at nightfall, its deck lights trailing across the water like threads of gold. The voyage was programmed to match the console's internal clock, aligning its schedule with real time so that the ship's journey would always begin as the sun set in the player's world. For many, it became the first moment Pokémon felt truly tied to the passing of real days, the illusion of the universe breathing beside them. Deeper into the region lies the Giant Chasm, an enormous crater ringed with ice and mystery. In lore, it was created when a meteor fell from the heavens, but its deeper truth ties to a being who once descended from the sky and transformed the land itself. The cave's layout mirrors a spiral, a motif repeated throughout Unova as a symbol of eternal return. The faint frost that covers its surface isn't uniform. It thickens near the walls, suggesting energy radiating from the center outward. The sound design there contains an almost inaudible hum recorded from slowed-down wind instruments, meant to simulate the breath of something sleeping. The forests near Lacunosa town hold one of Unova's most haunting legends. Locals whisper that at night, the walls that surround their town were built not for protection from outsiders, but from something within. The architecture is defensive yet beautifully carved, as though fear and faith built it together. When the night wind passes through its gates, it produces a flute-like tone that villagers say mimics the cry of the monster they once feared. The story blends seamlessly with the region's mythic Pokémon, creating a cycle where fact and legend depend entirely on who tells them. Marvelous Bridge, connecting two halves of Unova's coast, is perhaps the quietest location in the entire series. No trainers wait there, no battles occur, only the sound of wind. Occasionally, a small shadow crosses the path, hinting at a playful presence unseen. In the original design document, the bridge was meant to have an invisible spirit, Pokémon visible only through reflection. The idea was left unused, but its trace remains in the way the environment feels inhabited by memory. Many of Unova's hidden areas reward patience rather than power. The village bridge, with its soft guitar theme and gentle river flow, is among the most beloved for this reason. Its music layers multiple instruments that fade in as the player moves: guitar, humming voice, percussion, and even human breath. Each sound represents a villager, and when all are heard together, the song completes itself, a living symphony that grows only through exploration. It is a perfect symbol of the region's theme, harmony born from connection. The PokeStar Studios in Burbank City was a playful experiment that blurred game and fiction. Players could film movies alongside Pokémon, each scene following branching scripts with multiple endings. Hidden within the scripts are fragments of self-reference, films that echo real events of the series, such as a scientist creating a living weapon or an ancient creature falling from space. The developers used this feature to reflect on the mythology of the games themselves, as though Unova were aware of its own history. Some of the region's most overlooked Pokémon carry surprisingly deep origins. Cofagrigus was designed from Egyptian sarcophagi, but its golden mask draws directly from the concept of vanity, the idea that humans long to preserve their image forever. Early drafts had its eyes closed, but the art team chose to open them slightly, giving it awareness of those who gaze upon it. The blue flames around its form were meant to represent envy, a human emotion given ghostly shape. Galvantula, the electric spider, uses silk charged with static to paralyze prey. The designers studied how real-world spiders produce webbing through spinnerets, then translated the process into electricity instead of protein. Its signature move, Electroweb, was animated using the same algorithm as Thunderbolt, but reversed in direction, lightning drawn inward rather than cast outward. This subtle change symbolized how technology and nature converge, capturing energy instead of releasing it. Hydreigon, one of Unova's most formidable creatures, has origins in both mythology and censorship. Early drafts portrayed it with mechanical parts, inspired by fighter aircraft, but developers decided to emphasize organic chaos instead. Its 3 heads were designed to move slightly out of sync, showing that unity through discord could be its own form of power. The animation team gave each head a delay of exactly 2 frames to make its movements unsettling without being jarring. Its dark typing represents the danger of unbalanced ambition, intelligence turned inward until it devours itself. The trio of elemental monkeys, Pansir, Pansage, and Panpour, reference an old proverb, "See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil." Their designs were drawn from classical Japanese carvings, but their personalities mirror modern youth. Each was meant to represent adaptability in a changing world. One nurtures, one learns, and one plays. When the team debated removing them from the roster for balance reasons, a designer argued they embodied the theme of unity too strongly to cut. They remained, becoming quiet mascots for the region's message. Unova's relationship with sound extends far beyond its music. The cries of its Pokémon were among the first to use layered effects, combining real-world recordings with synthesized tones. The chirp of Deerling was sampled from a springtime bird call recorded in Sapporo, then pitched upward to sound playful. The echo in Kyurem's cry was produced by dragging a glass object across ice, giving a raw edge that feels both natural and alien. Every sound carries intention, each one a heartbeat stitched into digital space. The Unova subway system, connecting cities through sleek tunnels, was meant to represent how progress links even the most distant people. Its design borrowed from New York's underground lines, but the developers added rhythmic lighting that flickers in sync with the background track's tempo. The Battle Subway's announcer voice, calm yet excited, was recorded by a developer who'd never acted before. They kept his natural cadence because it sounded genuine, the same philosophy that defined Unova itself. Even ordinary routes carry their own spirit. Route 4, lined with sand and scaffolding, was deliberately unfinished, a place caught between desert and development. Its shifting layout in Black 2 and White 2 represents the passage of time, showing how civilization overtakes nature even in the span of a few years. The excavation sites visible along the road were drawn to mimic archaeological dig patterns, grounding the fantasy in real science. Unova's relationship with time is woven subtly throughout its landscapes. The seasons change not just visually, but emotionally. Music tempo shifts with each season. The same route feels faster in spring, slower in winter. The snow that gathers on trees in cold months reduces the volume of footsteps, giving the illusion that the air itself thickens with silence. These details were added so the world would feel like it aged alongside the player, not frozen, but breathing. Among the more symbolic Pokémon, Reuniclus represents unity through collaboration. Its body is composed of multiple cells that merge to form a larger mind, mirroring the scientific concept of multicellularity. Developers cited it as the embodiment of Unova's themes, individuality within wholeness. The jelly-like membrane surrounding it was inspired by microscope imagery of embryos, emphasizing creation rather than destruction. Volcarona, revered as the sun Pokémon, has lore that predates Unova's written history. Ancient murals show it emerging from volcanic ash, spreading warmth when the world fell dark. Its design merges motifs of fire and rebirth, making it one of the few non-legendary Pokémon treated as divine within its own lore. The light patterns on its wings were modeled after solar flares, painted with layered gradients that fade like sunset. Its presence at the heart of the relic castle links the old world to the new, flame to sand, life to ruin. In Castilia's back alleys, graffiti can be found on the walls, small pixel patterns resembling faces of Pokémon from earlier generations. These were placed by developers as tributes to their colleagues' favorite species, hidden gifts within the concrete maze. A single trash can near the docks holds a rare dialogue line about dreams taking root even in steel. It was written by a scenario writer who believed hope could grow anywhere if given time, and somewhere within Unova's sprawling landscapes, that hope lingers. From the humming bridges to the quiet forests, every sound and shadow carries memory. The region was built not only as a world to explore, but as a mirror, reflecting our own balance between truth and ideals, nature and progress, motion and rest. In the calm rhythm of its cities and the hush of its deserts, Unova whispers what all its legends mean at their core, that every step forward is a conversation between what was and what could be. By the time Team Plasma rose to prominence, Unova was already a region built on ideas. Its people lived among steel, light, and sound, and yet many felt an invisible distance between themselves and the Pokémon beside them. Plasma's message, that Pokémon deserved liberation, wasn't shouted as villainy, it was whispered as philosophy. Their uniforms resembled medieval armor, not for intimidation, but symbolism. They saw themselves as knights, defending purity against corruption. The developers intentionally avoided painting them as simple antagonists, instead portraying their ideology as an echo of humanity's own uncertainty. N, their enigmatic leader, became the heart of that uncertainty. His conversations never sought conflict, they invited reflection. His castle, hidden behind the League, stands as one of the most profound visual metaphors in the series, a fortress built in secret, towering above the world that pretends not to see it. When it rises from the earth during the climax, the camera tilts upward slowly, showing not power but inevitability. The earth doesn't shake violently, it unfolds, as if revealing something that had been buried in plain sight. That scene marked one of the first times a Pokémon game used architecture as storytelling, a living symbol of ideas surfacing. Inside the castle, the corridors are lined with velvet and silence. The walls echo faintly with organ music, recorded in a real cathedral, to capture reverberation beyond what the console could normally produce. Each note of N's theme represents duality, a melody that ascends and descends simultaneously, creating a loop of unresolved emotion. When the player walks, the tempo subtly adjusts to their movement, a hidden feature meant to create the feeling of breathing together with the world around them. Even Getsy's, the orchestrator behind Plasma, was designed not just as a manipulator, but as a mirror of extremism. His name comes from a musical chord, G and C, the dissonant interval known as a tritone, historically called the Devil's Cord. It was chosen deliberately to represent imbalance disguised as harmony. His staff, shaped like a tuning fork, completes that metaphor. He wields music itself as power, conducting chaos in pursuit of control. When the story concludes, the dragons representing truth and ideals clash once more. Yet the confrontation isn't destruction, it's revelation. Each side of the conflict learns the other's necessity. In that moment, the game presents one of its quietest lessons, that even those guided by truth still need dreams, and those following ideals must acknowledge reality. 2 years later, Black 2 and White 2 expanded Unova's world, showing what happens when the echoes of revolution settle. The region changed not through catastrophe, but through evolution. Cities expanded, bridges rebuilt, new habitats formed. It was the first Pokémon sequel to directly depict the passage of time, progress visible through environment alone. Driftvale gained skyscrapers where there were once cranes, while Aspertia City emerged on the western border as a symbol of rebirth. The developers described it as a sunrise in concrete, a place where the next generation begins unaware of the storms that came before. One of the most beautiful details of Unova's continuity lies in its forgotten corners. In the ruins of N's castle, grass grows through marble. The music there is the same as before, but slower, rearranged with piano instead of organ. The shift reflects memory softened by forgiveness. Small Pokémon can be seen living freely in the corridors, a silent acknowledgement that N's dream, though imperfect, changed something lasting. The ecosystem of Unova reflects this theme of transformation. Its geography is more diverse than any region before it. Frozen peaks, volcanic caverns, lush forests, arid deserts, and urban sprawl coexist in a single landmass. Each biome represents an aspect of modern civilization's relationship with nature: cohabitation, exploitation, renewal, and adaptation. The developers studied how natural landscapes could be compressed into symbolic spaces, ensuring every route felt like a chapter of environmental storytelling. In the forests near Nakreen, fallen logs display patterns of fungus that form perfect concentric circles. These textures were drawn by hand, not procedurally generated, to symbolize growth through decay. The museum at the city's center ties directly into this philosophy, a place where relics and fossils are preserved not to glorify the past, but to learn from it. The director, Lenora, was designed as both scholar and fighter, combining intellect and physical strength to represent the balance between tradition and innovation. The Dream Yard, where the player first encounters psychic-type Pokémon capable of projecting illusions, was originally a factory that collapsed under its own progress. Its walls, covered in moss and graffiti, stand as commentary on obsolescence, how technology can outlive purpose but never meaning. Musharna, found sleeping amid the ruins, represents dream energy, both as resource and emotion. The pink mist it emits is described as soothing, but also potentially dangerous in excess, suggesting that even imagination must be handled with care. Route 5, stretching near the heart of the region, is lined with performers and markets. It serves as a social hub, representing Unova's vibrant urban diversity. Its music fuses acoustic guitar and synthesized bass, merging natural and digital textures, a quiet echo of Unova's overarching contrast. A few non-player characters mention selling berries imported from faraway regions, subtly hinting at the global trade network connecting Unova to the rest of the Pokémon world. In Chargestone Cave, the air hums with electric resonance. The glowing stones within it pulse, with a rhythm based on the system's internal clock, their light dimming and brightening in time with the seconds passing in real life. The Pokemon that inhabit the cave, drawn to magnetic fields, form one of the most scientifically consistent ecosystems in the series. The idea was to show evolution guided not just by nature, but by the world's invisible energies. Further north lies Twist Mountain, a structure shaped like both a mine and a tomb. It changes seasonally, filling with snow that alters its layout and lighting. The workers within comment on how the mountain never stays the same, a line meant to reflect impermanence rather than randomness. The fossils discovered there connect directly to Nova's prehistoric past, revealing that even long before humanity arrived, the region was already adapting, a land constantly rewriting itself. In Undella Bay, the sound of waves plays in harmonic intervals that match the chords of its background music. This was no accident. Composers layered environmental sound effects to blend with the key of the track, so the sea itself becomes part of the melody. The tranquil rhythm masks deeper mysteries, as the abyssal ruins beneath the water hold one of the series' most cryptic puzzles. The inscriptions inside are written in a ciphered alphabet derived from Latin and Greek, describing a civilization that fell through hubris, scholars who sought to control life itself and were erased by the sea. The ruins' walls pulse faintly with bioluminescence, flickering in sync with the player's steps, as though remembering intrusion. Unova's legendaries are woven tightly into this ecosystem of symbolism. Tornadus, Thunderous, and Landorus form a trio based on the Japanese concept of agricultural balance: wind, rain, and soil. Their myth states that when they quarrel, disaster strikes, but when united, they bring prosperity. This mirrors ancient Shinto philosophy, harmony with nature as a moral duty. Their incarnate and Therian forms represent perspective, how gods can appear as either beasts or guardians, depending on the eyes that see them. Kurem, the frozen dragon, said to be the husk left behind after truth and ideals separated, embodies absence. Its icy shell is not armor, but emptiness, the physical manifestation of incompleteness. When fused with either of its counterparts, it doesn't overpower them, it remembers what it once was. The resulting forms symbolize reconciliation through imperfection, a message consistent with the region's belief that unity is born from acceptance, not dominance. The sequels added Colress, a scientist who studies the limits of Pokemon potential through technology. His character stands as a quiet counterpart to N, both seekers of understanding, but through opposing methods. Where N listens, Colress measures, yet even he acknowledges emotion's place in science, calling it the variable that can never be controlled. His color scheme of white and blue reflects clarity and detachment, mirroring his ideals without casting judgment. In the heart of Castilia's Sky Arrow Bridge, developers hid an Easter egg, visible only through frame-perfect timing. If the player pauses mid-span and rotates the camera, they can glimpse a faint outline of Unova's map reflected in the harbor water. The texture was intentionally blurred, a poetic detail representing self-awareness, the world seeing itself. Unova's mythology reaches backward and forward simultaneously. Its ruins speak of forgotten gods, while its skyscrapers point to endless possibility. In this tension between what is remembered and what is imagined, the region finds peace. Even the player's own journey, from beginning to champion, mirrors that cycle, learning, choosing, reconciling. And when the credits fade and the wind of Route 1 returns, Unova continues to hum, cities glowing like constellations, forests breathing softly in the dark. For all its movement, the region's soul remains still, caught in perfect balance between the mechanical and the mythical. By the time the world of Unova begins to quiet again, its myths have changed shape. They are no longer stories of conflict and division, but of memory, recollections of a land that learned balance not from conquest, but from coexistence. The legends that once ruled its skies now drift into calm, appearing not as threats but reminders. Tornadus, Thunderous, and Landorus, once called the forces of nature, settle in the clouds beyond the horizon. Farmers describe their storms not as destruction, but as cleansing, a rhythm that renews the soil each year. When the trio's energy converges, it forms an aurora visible even over the lights of Castelia, and locals whisper that this glow is the Earth's gratitude, shimmering like breath in the sky. In the northern regions near La Canosa, the air carries colder stories, the whispers of Curem, the incomplete dragon. Its cavern remains untouched, rimmed with frost that never melts even in midsummer. The ice glows faintly from within, reacting to unseen energy beneath the stone. In the silence, explorers have reported hearing faint, rhythmic vibrations, not like footsteps, but a heartbeat slowed by centuries of stillness. Some say the cavern itself breathes. The scientists who once sought to capture Curem's essence left behind notes describing its body as a puzzle of missing energy, a being that mourns its own incompletion. In the lore, this absence is sacred. It represents the space between truth and ideals, the quiet where understanding is born. Further west, within the twisted corridors of Pokestar Studios, the echoes of Unova's culture play out on screen. Each film, from light comedies to sci-fi dramas, hides fragments of the region's myth. Bryson Man, the story of a hero who returns from exile to defend his city, mirrors the gym leader's own past. Full Metal Cop retells the conflict between creation and control, a reflection of humanity's endless fascination with strength, and the mysterious Beyond the Ultra Warp features a being of light descending through space to heal a world fractured by ambition. The writers claimed this was only fiction, yet the timing of its release, months after new celestial Pokémon were discovered in other regions, led many to believe otherwise. Nova's artistic expression has always blurred fact and imagination. The painters of Nakreen, the sculptors of Driftvale, and the performers of Nimbasa all see their craft as a dialogue with nature. The Driftvale market even sells pigments derived from berry dust, said to change color under moonlight. According to local folklore, artists who paint by its glow can capture emotion itself, an idea that inspired one of Unova's most poetic Pokédex entries, describing a Pokémon whose tears become jewels when it sings at night. Nature itself continues to play a quiet role in Unova's ongoing transformation. The seasons, once shifting dramatically every few weeks, were later slowed in the sequels to reflect gradual change, a design decision mirroring the region's newfound stability. In winter, snow drapes the forests in silver stillness, muffling every sound except the crunch of footsteps. In summer, the cicadas of Route 6 sing so loudly that the game's sound balance was manually adjusted to prevent them from overpowering the music. The developers joked that Unova's summer almost drowned out its own story. Among the many Pokémon that define this region's tone, one of the most understated is Audino. Its design embodies empathy, soft features, pastel colors, and gentle eyes that convey comfort rather than power. Its Pokédex describes it as capable of hearing heartbeats from great distances. interpreting emotion through sound. The design team intended it as a modern equivalent to Chansey, a creature born for healing but suited to Unova's modern world. Its mega evolution later exaggerated this symbolism, surrounding it with wing-like ears that shield others rather than attack. The connection between Pokemon and sound continues throughout Unova. Crussel's rocky shell emits faint vibrations when it moves, matching the tempo of its battle music. Joltik generates static patterns that subtly interfere with radio signals, a behavior inspired by real-world studies of insects drawn to electrical currents. Even Stunfisk, often overlooked, was designed around humor and surprise. Its flat shape hides advanced animation detail, with the entire model rigged to compress like rubber before springing back. This gave it the illusion of cartoon liveliness amid Unova's realistic textures. The technology of Unova reflects its world's maturity. The X-Transceiver, a small video device, became the first in-game communication tool to feature live facial animation synced to dialogue. The team achieved this by recording phonetic patterns and assigning them to frame-based lip movements, effectively giving speech rhythm for the first time in the series. In multiplayer, the signal delay was coded intentionally, a subtle nod to how even perfect technology cannot replicate real presence. Deeper in the mountains lies Reversal Mountain, a geographical wonder that embodies Unova's central philosophy. In one version of the game, its lava glows bright and restless, while in the other, its interior is cooled to tranquil stone. The two states represent not parallel worlds, but mirrored moods, the idea that balance exists between fire and ash, motion and stillness. This dual design was achieved by overlaying identical maps with altered lighting filters, a technical illusion that saved memory while doubling meaning. The sequels also introduced the World Tournament in Driftvale, a place where trainers from every region gather in friendly competition. What began as a simple battle facility evolved into a celebration of the series' history. When challengers from Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh arrived, their appearances were carefully scripted to reflect growth, leaders older, wiser, and quieter. The developers described it as a reunion of worlds where every region's philosophy could coexist without dominance. Atop Dragon Spiral Tower, the oldest structure in Unova, the wind never stops. The sound of it was created by blending three separate recordings: ocean surf, flute resonance, and the hum of an air conditioner. The combination produces an almost hypnotic tone, shifting subtly with each step. The tower's spiral staircase symbolizes ascent not toward victory, but understanding. Its broken tiles and uneven edges remind players that enlightenment is imperfect, shaped by time and loss. One of Unova's most emotional details lies in N's later appearances. After the events of the main story, he becomes a wanderer, no longer a leader, but a listener. His dialogue changes depending on the time of day, reflecting introspection and peace. In one encounter, he remarks that the sound of wind through trees feels like a conversation between truths. This line, written by the game's lead scenario designer, encapsulates Unova's heart, philosophy spoken softly enough to dream to. The developers of Unova described their creative approach as urban mythology. They wanted every design, from buildings to Pokemon, to carry a fragment of a legend disguised as modern life. The Ferris wheel of Nimbasa, the bridges stretching like veins across the map, and even the constant motion of the subway system all represent cycles, endless connections forming between people and the world around them. Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion, the swords of justice, embody another aspect of that myth. Their story parallels human conflict and forgiveness, warriors who once opposed mankind but learned compassion through understanding. Their stances in battle are deliberately different. Cobalion steady, Terrakion braced, Virizion fluid, illustrating strength in unity, not uniformity. The lake where they first met still glows faintly at night, and its reflection forms the shape of a perfect triangle, the geometry of equality. Keldeo, their young companion, completes the narrative as innocence untested. Its name derives from Kelpie, a mythical water horse, and its story arc mirrors the journey of growth through humility. The movie adaptation, Curem versus the Sword of Justice, extends this theme by portraying courage not as domination, but vulnerability, learning to admit fear before finding strength. Unova's legendaries are not gods to be worshipped, they are metaphors to be understood. Each represents an idea, emotion given form. Meloetta embodies art itself, shifting between song and dance as a reflection of expression's dual nature. Genesect, resurrected from ancient fossil to living machine, stands as a warning of technological arrogance, creation without conscience. And Victini, the small spark of victory that lives at the heart of Liberty Garden, is hope made tangible. In the developer's notes, Victini's flame was called the ember that starts every story. Even the smallest details of Unova's world reinforce its quiet humanity. The Pokemon centers were redesigned with curved ceilings to resemble open hands. The lighting shifts color based on health restoration, red for vitality, blue for rest. The healing chime plays in the key of C major, the same as the region's main theme, tying every moment of comfort back to the sound of home. In the sequel's postgame, when all the great conflicts have faded, the player can find N's room still preserved within the ruins of his castle. Toys are scattered across the floor, untouched since the day the world changed. The music there uses only 5 notes, looping endlessly with no resolution. The melody was designed to represent an unfinished thought, innocence frozen in time. At sunset, as Unova's day draws to a close, the region seems to exhale once again. The lights of Castelia flicker on, the rivers mirror the glow of the skyline, and the sky above the Ferris wheel fades into lavender. Even the wild Pokemon grow still, their cries softening into distant echoes. For all its ambition, technology, and history, Unova remains most beautiful in silence. And it is in that silence that its story continues, a place where truth and ideals are no longer enemies, but two sides of the same calm breath, drifting endlessly through the cities, forests, and skies of a world that has finally learned to listen. Long before players understood its meaning, the dream world of Unova was already whispering something profound. It wasn't simply another feature, it was the first time Pokemon invited its audience to explore imagination as geography. Accessed through sleep, it blurred the boundary between worlds, suggesting that every creature, every tree, and every fragment of the region held a life that continued when unseen. The dream world's soft colors and drifting clouds were designed to feel weightless. Nothing had hard edges, even the trees swayed like watercolor brushstrokes, as if painted in motion. When Game Freak's artists first sketched the concept, they described it as a place that only exists when remembered. The intention wasn't to create an alternate map, but a dream that vanishes the moment you open your eyes. The music, built entirely from echoing bells and reversed piano chords, loops without beginning or end. It's not a song so much as breathing. Within that dream floated Pokemon asleep in the real world, their spirits wandering through gardens, oceans, and ancient ruins suspended in sky. Interacting with them meant borrowing their thoughts, understanding their nature through play. When you plucked berries or watered seeds, the game wasn't rewarding you for progress, it was teaching patience. The dream world was, in essence, an act of kindness disguised as gameplay. Muna and Musharna became its quiet guardians. The pair were born from an idea that predates Unova itself, an unused concept from the earliest Pokemon games, finally realized decades later. In the Dreamyard ruins, where the pair first appears, their mist carries faint images of the player's own experiences. It's said that the color of that mist reflects emotion, pink for calm, blue for reflection, and purple for melancholy. The code that generates these hues responds subtly to time of day, aligning the world's emotion with the player's. The researchers who studied the dream mist in-game treated it as a form of energy that bridges minds, but beneath that scientific surface, it carried myth. Unova's poets wrote that the mist was memory, the world itself dreaming through those who lived upon it. The dream world's connection to reality wasn't technological but spiritual, a space reminding both humans and Pokemon that thought and feeling shape existence as much as matter does. Every dream world zone had its own mood. The pleasant forest pulsed with greens that shifted according to local weather data pulled from the system clock. The windswept sky drifted endlessly, clouds moving at half the normal speed to suggest peace, and the spooky manor, filled with flickering candles and creaking wood, mirrored the mind's curiosity, fear softened by wonder. The Pokemon found there weren't random selections, but psychological symbols: butterflies for freedom, ghosts for memory, and small mammals for comfort. Hidden deep within the dream world's files were messages left by its designers. One line reads, "Every world is someone's dream." Another, "When you wake, remember that your footsteps are still here." These quiet notes reveal how personal the project was, a meditation on digital impermanence. The servers that once hosted those floating islands have long since gone dark, but the emotion they carried still lingers in memory. Unova's fascination with consciousness extends beyond the dream world. In the main world, certain Pokemon echo similar ideas. Behem communicates by manipulating brainwaves, altering memory not out of malice but curiosity. Its lights flash in prime-numbered intervals, a pattern meant to evoke alien intelligence. Sigilif, whose circular flight paths trace ancient symbols, behaves like a sentinel trapped in endless vigilance, flying patterns written by people long gone. Each of these designs explores the same question: what does awareness mean in a world shared by so many forms of life? The link between dreams and evolution surfaces again in the region's technology. The Sea Gear, the glowing device displayed on the console's second screen, mimics the pattern of REM sleep waves. The pulsing hexagons are identical to the oscillations of a brain in deep rest, connecting the player's interface with the Pokemon's inner world. Even the wireless communications of Unova were built as metaphors, invisible signals representing invisible thoughts. In this way, Unova became the first region where science and soul were treated as reflections, not opposites. The laboratory in Nuvema Town, though filled with computers, also holds plants and sunlight streaming through open windows. Professor Juniper herself is portrayed not as an authority figure, but a philosopher. Her dialogue speaks less about data and more about gratitude, about cherishing what exists rather than conquering it. The Pokemon themselves embody this philosophy. Gotharita and Gothitelle study the stars, not to predict destiny, but to understand connection. Their gaze into the sky mirrors humanity's own search for meaning in the unknown. Reuniclus, composed of countless living cells, is the biological mirror of that cosmic curiosity, proof that even the smallest parts of existence crave unity. In the sequel era, when dream world integration deepened, these ideas grew even quieter. Players could befriend Pokémon through shared dreams, exchanging gifts and experiences across invisible distances. The feature turned the very act of rest into social connection, a gentle metaphor for empathy. To visit someone else's dream garden was to step into their imagination, a reminder that every life carries its own landscape of thought. The global Dream World project, though short-lived, marked a turning point for the series. It expanded the definition of play, not winning or collecting, but caring. The developers described it as an experiment in softness, and when it eventually closed, they left one final message on its homepage: "Thank you for dreaming with us." It was not a farewell, but a sigh, an acknowledgement that dreams, like seasons, must end to be remembered. Unova's themes of consciousness ripple outward through its environment as well. The sound design of its cities hums with subtle heartbeat rhythms. Castilia's ambient track includes a faint mechanical thrum recorded from an actual subway tunnel in Tokyo, layered with electronic tones that rise and fall like breathing. When slowed down, that hum matches the tempo of the healing chime in Pokémon centers, linking technology to restoration. Even the smallest sensory details tie back to the dream motif. The way fog behaves on certain routes, drifting forward as the player moves, was achieved through a parallax effect that simulates depth without actual three-dimensional rendering. The illusion feels like walking through memory itself, where past and present blur at the edges. One of the most symbolic scenes in the sequels occurs in the Strange House, an abandoned mansion near Reversal Mountain. The interior rearranges itself as the player explores, rooms shifting like thoughts half remembered. Ghostly children whisper fragments of a diary, piecing together the tragedy of a girl who dreamed of the lunar wing, an item tied to another region's guardian of dreams. When finally found, the wing shimmers faintly, connecting Unova's myth to Sinnoh's, implying that dreams transcend regions, generations, and even worlds. This connection between regions became Unova's quiet gift to the series. For the first time, it treated the Pokémon world as a continuous reality, not a series of isolated stories, but a shared consciousness of memory. The dream world, the ruins, and the stars above all pointed toward one truth: that every thought leaves a trace, and every life echoes beyond itself. At night, when the in-game world dims, certain Pokémon centers light only half their lamps. The glow that remains is soft and golden, meant to evoke the warmth of a bedside lamp left on for comfort. The designers called it the Dream Light. Even the shadows it casts are rounded, no sharp edges, no sudden darkness. It's as if the world itself refuses to wake you too quickly. In the deeper layers of Unova's lore, one finds the idea that dreams are not illusions, but rehearsals for balance. The people of the region believe that every choice begins first as a thought, and every truth once existed as an ideal. To dream, then, is to practice living. That philosophy underpins the entire narrative of Unova. Truth and ideals born not from conflict, but from imagination, the most human force of all. And when the dream fades, when the player logs off, and the soft hum of the console goes silent, Unova remains, asleep, awake, or somewhere in between, still breathing quietly beneath the rhythm of its own heartbeat, reminding those who listen that every world, digital or real, exists because someone once believed in it deeply enough to dream it. Unova's beauty has always come from its contradictions, cities that reach for the sky beside forests that whisper of the past, steel and soil coexisting without apology. Its people have learned not to erase what came before, but to build alongside it, allowing time to layer itself like sediment. If Kanto was a story of discovery, Johto one of tradition, and Hoenn one of balance, then Unova became the story of coexistence, the understanding that modernity and memory are not enemies, but reflections. The wildlife of Unova evolves in rhythm with the cities. The flocking patterns of Tranquil, near Castelia, follow air currents generated by skyscrapers, using the man-made heat of the city to sustain flight in colder months. Herdier have adapted to urban life, serving as gentle companions for construction workers and guards along bridges. Even the humble Patrat, seen in grassy roots and alleys alike, displays one of the most complex animations in the series. Its tail flickers nervously, coated with random intervals to simulate real animal alertness. Unova's creatures don't exist apart from civilization, they thrive within it. The bridges that connect the region embody this harmony. Each one tells a story of design and intention. The Driftvale Drawbridge, nicknamed the Charizard Bridge by locals, was the first moving structure in Pokemon history to feature real-time environmental effects. Its giant counterweights and mechanical lifts were modeled after maritime bridges that allow ships to pass, representing how progress must occasionally pause to let nature through. During flight season, Swana are often seen gliding beneath it, their wings catching light from the city as if tracing constellations across the water. Sky Arrow Bridge, the region's crown of engineering, stretches so far that the music fades as you cross it, leaving only the wind. This silence was intentional. The composer wanted players to feel the scale of the world without melody guiding them. When the camera pans upward mid-crossing, it isn't just a cinematic flourish, it's a reminder of humility. Beneath the city, beneath technology and architecture, lies the rhythm of the ocean, eternal, forgiving, and unchanged. In contrast, the Tubaline Bridge farther north embodies power and connection. The massive pipeline running through its center glows faintly at night, pulsing in sync with the energy grid of Unova. It was designed to carry heat and electricity between cities, turning even transportation into a symbol of circulation. The bridge's structure echoes the region's mechanical Pokemon, efficiency turned into beauty. Even Unova's smallest towns hide layers of storytelling. In Floxy, the chirping of Pidove at dawn syncs with the gentle percussion of its theme, creating a soundscape that feels handmade. The town's houses are arranged in a crescent pattern to mimic the moon's arc across the valley. The locals say it brings dreams into alignment, a superstition older than recorded maps. In Lentimus, the town built near volcanic ash, the windows of every home are coated with a thin layer of glass dust that glitters when sunlight hits it. At dusk, the glow looks like falling stars. The town's founder, a potter, chose the site because the earth there remembered fire. Many of the clay artifacts found across Unova, including ancient urns and sculptures, were fired in Lentimus kilns. Their designs often depict Pokemon intertwined with human shapes, an early acknowledgement that the two forms of life were never truly separate. The route between Lentimus and Undella traces the edge of Reversal Mountain, a place where geology becomes metaphor. Its layers of cooled magma record thousands of years of transformation, destruction turned into foundation. The Pokemon that live there, from Drifblim floating in heated currents to Camerupt grazing on mineral slopes, exist in harmony with the land's extremes. Their presence proves that even fire and ice can share space without conflict. One of the most poetic pieces of Unova's design lies in the desert resort. Beneath the shimmering heat, the sand dunes move in coded rhythm, their formation patterns programmed to change with the game's clock. Every few minutes, the wind direction shifts, redrawing the landscape without the player noticing. The relics buried below, stone walls, hieroglyphic carvings, and the endless spiral stairways of the relic castle remind explorers that history isn't hidden, it's constantly being rewritten by time. The people of Unova live with this awareness. Artists in Castelia often speak of their work as collaboration with the city itself. Street musicians in the plaza align their performances with the ferry schedule so that their songs end as ships depart, sending melodies across the water. Cafe owners adjust their lighting to match the sunset reflected off the Prism Tower's twin spires. Life in Unova is an act of synchronization, the merging of countless small rhythms into one continuous pulse. The Unova region also introduced an idea never seen before in Pokemon: generational growth, visible in design. Between Black and Black 2 and White 2, even roots changed. Trees grew taller, buildings expanded, and characters aged. The sequels didn't just add content, they let time pass. NPCs referenced old conversations, gym leaders reminisced, and young trainers matured into professionals. The world felt alive enough to remember you. Nature returned this favor. Routes overgrown with grass hint that the land reclaims what humans leave behind. In the Driftvale drawbridge, wild ducklet began nesting along the beams in the years between the games, a subtle environmental evolution coded into the background data. These small, nearly invisible changes give the region a sense of memory, a world that reacts to care and neglect alike. The Pokemon that inhabit these spaces continue to reflect humanity's spirit. Scraggy, the streetwise lizard, carries its loose skin like a jacket, symbolizing self-made confidence. It isn't born with pride, it earns it. Emolga, gliding between power lines in the city's outskirts, becomes a bridge between wilderness and industry, its static discharges so precise that they sometimes synchronize with the streetlights it passes. Bouffalant, calm yet powerful, was inspired by American bison, a nod to Unova's cultural roots. Its afro-like mane wasn't added as humor, but as texture, a celebration of individuality thriving in herds. Even Unova's plants tell stories. The flowers of Route 9 bloom only when the sun hits them from the west, a design quirk meant to reflect resilience in imperfect light. The grass in Victory Road contains 3 shades of green, blended by pixel, giving it a living shimmer under movement. And the giant leaves of the forest near Pinwheel flutter faster when certain Pokemon pass through, using their speed data as input to create environmental response. The Pokemon Centers, too, evolve subtly between regions. In Unova, their architecture mirrors that of libraries, circular walls and domed ceilings, encouraging quiet. The music is slightly slower here than in Sinnoh, reflecting a region more reflective than ambitious. The nurse's smile animation, though identical in structure, lingers a fraction longer on the final frame, a detail so minor most players never notice, but deliberately chosen to convey warmth. The human characters of Unova are written as extensions of its ecosystem. Elisa's fashion show is less about vanity and more about empowerment. an art form that reflects the electricity of connection. Clay's mining represents humility. He digs downward to find strength, rather than building upward to display it. Skyla's flight reminds players of release, that freedom can exist even within boundaries. Bryson, the actor turned monk, embodies reflection. His story of leaving fame to rediscover peace parallels the region's own arc from industrial growth to inner calm. His abandoned movie posters still hang in Pokestar Studios, faded and unlit, reminders of how ambition and spirituality often trade places in the pursuit of balance. The music of Unova binds all these stories together. Each area's melody carries fragments of others, motifs repeated like echoes across distance. The theme of Route 1 reappears in Castilia's street performers. The sound of the fairies blends into Driftvale's jazz, and the Pokemon League's fanfare borrows chords from N's lullaby. The region doesn't use themes to separate locations, but to connect them, musically proving what the story preaches. Everything belongs to the same harmony. When night falls over Unova, its cities become mirrors of the sky. The windows of Castelia form constellations. The streetlights of Nimbasa pulse like fireflies. The region's night palette was painted manually by the art team, each hue mixed to evoke twilight rather than darkness. Even in its deepest shadows, Unova never feels asleep. It feels contemplative, like the pause between breaths. And perhaps that's what defines the region most, its stillness and motion. The world moves constantly, yet never seems hurried. Trains glide quietly through the night. The sea brushes against the docks with practiced rhythm. The Pokemon sleep, the people rest, and above them all, the faint hum of balance continues, a sound that began with truth and ideals, but has since become something far gentler: contentment. In the quiet glow of Unova's midnight, every window, bridge, and forest breathes the same wordless understanding that progress and peace were never separate paths, only different verses of the same long, soothing song. Unova's history is not written in stone, but in feeling. Every bridge, every ruin, and every melody is a fragment of emotion disguised as geography. Where earlier regions told tales of creation and discovery, Unova speaks softly about consequence, about how every choice, no matter how righteous, ripples outward into the lives of others. It is a region built on memory, where truth and ideals once collided, but now coexist like the twin reflections on still water. At the center of its symbolism stands the Dragon of Balance. Though its story is told in fragments, it remains one of Pokemon's most profound metaphors. It is said that this great creature was once whole, embodying harmony between opposing forces. But when two brothers disagreed, one pursuing ideals, the other truth, the dragon split into two, each half taking one brother's conviction. Reshiram became light and honesty, Zekrom became shadow and hope, and the fragment that remained, silent and cold, turned inward and became Kyurem. The three are not rivals but stages of understanding, the ways belief can divide, heal, and rest. Reshiram's design carries this theme in every flame. Its tail engine burns with energy that represents transparency, the courage to see the world as it is. Its fire does not destroy, but illuminates. Zekrom's electricity hums with potential, its wings folded like turbines of imagination. It does not seek truth but the strength to keep believing. Kyurem, the empty vessel, is not a punishment but a pause, the breath between one thought and the next, waiting for resolution. The tale of the twin heroes has echoes throughout Unova's art and architecture. In Opelucid City, two versions of the same melody play, depending on the game. One version is soft and ancient, performed on woodwinds that sound like human breath. The other is digital and sharp, its rhythm like circuitry pulsing through a neon future. The city itself changes accordingly, either filled with organic curves or futuristic glass. This duality reflects how perspective shapes memory. The same world seen through different eyes becomes two worlds entirely. Many fans never realized that the symbol for Unova's Pokémon League, a spiral of wings surrounding a flame, was designed after the fusion core of the Dragon Trio. The flame represents Reshiram's truth. The electric current encircling it mirrors Zekrom's ideals. Their coexistence at the peak of the League suggests that victory in Unova isn't about strength but reconciliation. Every trainer ascending that mountain symbolically retraces the brothers' journey, learning to balance conviction with compassion. The Pokemon that populate Unova's storylines continue this pattern. Braviary and Mandibuzz, opposites in gender and symbolism, were created as living metaphors of pride and survival. One represents courage in daylight, the other endurance in shadow. Together they demonstrate that heroism wears many faces. Volcarona, guardian of the desert resort, was originally conceptualized as a divine replacement for the sun, a creature born when humanity's light was lost. Its glowing wings restore warmth to a frozen world, transforming despair into life. Even smaller creatures carry deep meaning. Litwick's gentle flame is said to guide spirits, yet it also drains their energy, a duality of comfort and danger. Darumaka, inspired by traditional good luck charms, embodies joy as resilience. It laughs even when the world feels cold. The ice type's lore that ancient people kept Darumaka droppings for warmth may sound humorous, yet it captures a quiet truth about survival through companionship. The themes of emotion and growth also manifest in the region's human characters. N remains one of Pokemon's most introspective figures, a boy raised among ideals so pure they became isolation. His bond with Pokemon is unfiltered, untouched by human habit, which makes his empathy painful rather than peaceful. When he speaks of hearing the voices of Pokemon, it isn't magic, it's sensitivity, a reflection of what happens when kindness is left without direction. His journey to understand people mirrors the player's own attempt to understand him. The music tied to N's character is among the series' most complex. Built on a 12-note loop, it never resolves, always circling back to its first chord. This structure mirrors his emotional state, perpetually seeking harmony but never finding it. Only during the final confrontation with the legendary dragons does the music finally shift key, symbolizing growth through acceptance. The battle theme, layered with bells and harp, feels less like conflict and more like awakening. Unova's mythology often places its legendaries as embodiments of philosophy rather than natural forces. The trio of musketeers, Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion, represent reason, courage, and compassion. Their disciple, Keldeo, learns that strength without empathy is incomplete. Tornadus, Thunderous, and Landorus, while often described as tempests, stand for renewal, storm, lightning, and soil, combining to bring fertility. Even Genesect, the resurrected predator turned cybernetic warrior, symbolizes the cost of technological progress, a reminder that evolution without empathy is destruction wearing innovation's face. Beyond myths, Unova's story is filled with quiet callbacks to earlier regions. The Celestial Tower, where trainers light candles for departed partners, mirrors Lavender Town's Tower of Memory from Kanto, yet the tone here is different. It is not haunted by fear, but by gratitude. The bells ring in major chords instead of minor ones, signaling that remembrance can be peaceful. The ghostly Pokemon who appear there aren't vengeful, they are curious, drawn to warmth. Castelia City, with its towering skyline and grid layout, embodies the dream of coexistence between human ambition and Pokemon presence. At its core stands the central plaza, where performers and travelers gather in rhythm with the tide. The music there features the faint sound of gulls, though no water is visible, a reminder that even cities carry echoes of the natural world they replaced. If you stop moving and listen, the hum of machinery fades into the sound of waves. In Driftvale, the coal dust that once darkened the docks is now considered sacred, a symbol of labor and resilience. Local trainers tell stories of a Pokemon that shines brighter the more soot it gathers, a legend born from the idea that effort itself becomes light. Clay's gym, carved into bedrock, is the physical embodiment of this belief, strength drawn not from height, but from depth. Unova's towns are deliberately arranged along philosophical lines. The starting area in Nuvema represents innocence and curiosity. Striaton, with its 3 elemental gym leaders, represents choice and diversity. Nimbasa stands for passion, the joy of entertainment and connection. Driftvale and Mistralton symbolize industry and exploration, and Opelucid, the final test before the Pokemon League, represents perspective, how truth depends on who is looking. This progression is not just geographical, it mirrors emotional growth. Each badge, each journey, is a step in self-awareness. Even the badges themselves carry hidden meaning. The trio badge resembles overlapping circles, symbolizing cooperation among differences. The jet badge forms the shape of wings, folded inward, strength held, not displayed. The legend badge, awarded in Opelucid, contains an ancient spiral pattern, a visual echo of the twin dragon's fusion core. In every sense, the region teaches through symbols rather than sermons. Among all these details, one fact often overlooked is that Unova was the first region fully detached from Japan's geography. Its design, based loosely on New York and surrounding areas, marked the series' global expansion. The developers studied urban planning, transportation, and art museums to ensure the region felt both foreign and familiar. The ferries and bridges were modeled on real-world infrastructure, but their names retained poetic simplicity. Sky Arrow, Driftvale, Marvelous. These weren't cities of conquest, but of cooperation. Unova's connection to art is seen in Nacrene City, where the Pokemon Museum houses fossils, sculptures, and canvases from across generations. Many of these artifacts reuse textures from earlier games, symbolizing how history is literally built upon what came before. The museum's curator, Lenora, represents knowledge as empathy, her gym puzzle based not on strength, but understanding context. She asks challengers to read between lines, teaching that intelligence is not knowing everything, but recognizing meaning. Throughout the region, nature and technology converse quietly. The Chargestone Cave hums with electromagnetism, its glowing crystals responding to touch. Those blue stones aren't just decoration. They pulse according to the system's energy output, syncing with the console's processing rhythm. The effect makes the cave feel alive, a breathing organism of light. Route 10, the final path before the League, is remembered for its music, slow, uplifting, and filled with quiet awe. The composer described it as the sound of preparing to rest. Its melody weaves themes from earlier roots, symbolizing reflection rather than escalation. The player walks not toward battle, but toward understanding, carrying the emotional weight of the entire journey. And when the final credits roll, the region does something subtle. It lets you keep walking. Unova doesn't end at victory. It continues breathing, offering conversations, rematches, and new perspectives. It was the first Pokemon world to acknowledge that endings aren't absolute. There is always another sunrise over Castelia, another ripple across Undella Bay, another moment of calm between steps. Because Unova's truest legacy isn't its architecture, its legendaries, or its technology. It is the way it makes players feel seen, how it takes ambition and turns it into reflection, how it takes noise and turns it into music. It is a world that teaches through stillness, reminding everyone who visits that growth is not about changing who you are, but listening long enough to understand why you were that way to begin. By the time Unova's story continues in its sequels, the region feels older, not in decay, but in wisdom. Time has passed, and that passage is visible everywhere. Grass grows through cracks in the roads near Driftvale. The skyline of Castelia reflects brighter colors, glass towers standing where scaffolds once rose. Even the air feels different, the restless energy of youth replaced with a calm acceptance that the world has changed and that this change is natural. Unova's sequels were the first to show a Pokemon world that remembers. Characters recall your deeds from the past, cities mention events as history rather than legend, and ruins you once explored now hold new life. The world has continuity, a trait rare in Pokemon's ever-restarting timelines. This subtle passage of time gives the region its heartbeat, reminding players that progress and nostalgia can coexist without erasing one another. Nowhere is that idea stronger than in Aspertia City, the new starting town. It rests on a cliffside overlooking an endless horizon, symbolizing both reflection and possibility. The view itself was deliberately placed. The first time in the series, a starting town allowed players to see the vastness of their upcoming journey from the very beginning. The city's design, with elevated streets and warm color palettes, represents optimism tempered by experience. It is the gentle exhale after an era of conflict. The sequel protagonists are not saviors of a broken world, but caretakers of a healing one. They inherit the peace earned by those before them and must learn to live within it. Their rivals, Hugh and Bianca, embody the two halves of that growth. Hugh's obsession with justice mirrors Unova's lingering guilt, the urge to fix everything too quickly. Bianca's calm professionalism reflects acceptance, that peace comes from patience, not power. Unova's shifting political climate is shown through its cities as well. Team Plasma's influence remains, but fractured. Half of its members now wander as philosophers, helping the weak and protecting Pokemon from harm. The other half hide in shadows, clinging to ideology long after its lost meaning. This division was designed to mirror the real world's complexity, that good and evil are rarely pure, and belief can evolve just as people do. Even the region's environments tell this story of rebirth. The burned remains of the plasma frigate rest along the coasts of Undella, its metallic husk now a nesting site for Wingull. The desert winds have softened, carrying seeds instead of sandstorms. The frozen city of Opelucid thaws in later seasons, revealing clear streets and faint reflections in the ice where once only silence reigned. Pokemon species introduced in the sequels carry this same symbolism. Lucario and its pre-evolution return as ambassadors of connection, representing harmony restored between humans and Pokemon. The new forms of existing creatures, like Black Kyurem and White Kyurem, illustrate the possibility of integration rather than division. They are not separate beings, but reconciliations of conflict, fusions that turn what was once broken into something whole again. The scientists of Unova, led by figures like Professor Juniper and her father Cedric, represent intellectual evolution. Their research no longer seeks control but understanding. The Pokédex itself changes purpose. Its entries focus less on classification and more on personality, hinting that science in this world has learned empathy. This tonal shift reflects Unova's larger philosophy that knowledge must coexist with care. Even the music of the sequels carries emotional growth. The themes of black and white, once filled with tension and uncertainty, return with warmer instrumentation. Piano replaces brass, strings replace percussion. The battle themes no longer surge with conflict, but flow like conversation. The composer described the soundtrack as nostalgia with sunlight, a phrase that perfectly captures Unova's essence, memory lit from within. The world's cultural heartbeat continues to thrive. In Castilia, the art galleries have expanded, featuring rotating exhibitions inspired by Pokémon-human partnerships. A new display titled The Shape of Trust uses moving lights to project silhouettes of trainers and their partners onto glass panels, each one fading gently into the next. The curator explains that the show is not about ownership, but coexistence. Every bond leaves a shadow, she says, and every shadow needs light to exist. Driftvale, once an industrial hub, becomes a place of community and craftsmanship. The market now sells jewelry made from discarded machinery, and its workers sing traditional songs that echo across the harbor. These verses, composed by miners, tell stories of perseverance and gratitude, proof that progress and humanity can coexist without consuming one another. The region's architecture subtly mirrors this transformation. The angular designs of Unova's first games are softened in the sequels. Color palettes shift toward earth tones and golds. Windows widen to let in light. Even the Pokémon centers glow warmer at night. Their lamps change to mimic natural firelight instead of fluorescent white. These artistic decisions give the world a living continuity, as if the land itself remembers what peace feels like. Many players noticed that, in the sequels, the natural world seemed gentler. Weather patterns were less harsh, and wild Pokémon appeared more frequently near human settlements. This wasn't random chance but intentional design, a representation of reconciliation between civilization and nature. Unova's balance had been restored, and the world reflected that healing. The ruins scattered across the region, Relic Castle, Dragon Spiral Tower, and the Abyssal Ruins, continue to whisper their histories. Each was built upon an earlier civilization that vanished without trace, their secrets hidden beneath water or sand. Linguists within the games translate ancient scripts that speak of cycles of light and shadow, mirroring the themes of the dragons. The runes themselves are written in a constructed alphabet based on the unknown glyphs of Johto, symbolizing continuity between generations, even across distance. The sequel's storylines explore human emotion as deeply as myth. N returns not as an antagonist, but as a wanderer, his sharp edges worn into calm. His dialogue softens, filled with gratitude and melancholy. When he speaks of his past, he does so not with regret but wonder, as though realizing that even pain has beauty. His new castle, overgrown with vines and open to sunlight, reflects this acceptance, nature reclaiming what ambition once built. One of the most moving moments in Unova's sequels occurs in the memory chamber of N's castle, where a single piano stands amid dust and ivy. When approached, It plays a delicate version of the old Team Plasma theme, stripped of its march-like rhythm. The transformation of the melody into something tender represents forgiveness. It is a musical apology, not to the world, but to oneself. The region's side stories continue to deepen its humanity. The Pokemon World Tournament brings together trainers from across every region, creating a living archive of the series' history. Each familiar face, Red, Blue, Cynthia, and others, appears older, calmer, humbled. The battles themselves feel less like competition and more like conversation between eras. The developers described it as a reunion of courage. Elsewhere, the marine tube, a glass tunnel beneath the ocean, symbolizes transparency between human and aquatic life. As players walk through, rays of sunlight filter down, scattering into moving patterns across the walls. Schools of Mantine glide above, and the gentle hum of machinery blends with whale song frequencies. It's not just a technical marvel, it's a sensory metaphor for coexistence. Humans enclosed in technology, yet still surrounded by life. Undella Bay, with its quiet surf and summer villas, represents the afterimage of success, the peace that follows struggle. Its music loops like a sigh, composed in slow triplets to evoke breathing. Locals speak of the tides, carrying memories of those who once sailed here, and sometimes, late at night, the waves glow faintly as if remembering sunlight. Even in its smallest details, the sequels show that Unova has learned gentleness. NPC dialogue often references kindness, people giving thanks to Pokemon or expressing regret for past ignorance. There's a maturity to their words that suggests collective growth. Children study both science and art, elders walk with Pokemon once feared, and towns no longer hide behind walls but open their gates. By the end of the story, when the player stands again at the Pokemon League, the journey feels less like a test and more like a reflection. The wind at the summit carries the echoes of everything learned: strength without cruelty, belief without blindness, progress without loss. The music swells not into triumph, but stillness, the sound of a world exhaling after a long and necessary dream. Unova's legacy, then, is not found in its battles or its legendaries, but in its continuity. It is the first region to prove that the Pokemon world remembers, that growth leaves footprints, that change can be tender. It whispers the same lesson through every generation that follows, that evolution isn't about becoming stronger, but becoming whole. And as night falls once more across the region, the skyline of Castelia glows in soft reflection. The sea mirrors the lights like constellations, and somewhere beneath the waves, the ruins of an older age hum faintly, content to be forgotten. Unova dreams quietly, not of conflict, but of connection, a reminder that the truest stories never end, they simply rest. As the years pass, the light of Unova never truly fades. It lingers softly across the fabric of the Pokemon world, its skyline and rivers remembered not as landmarks, but as feelings, the steady hum of balance, the calm breath of understanding. When future regions rise, they do so in Unova's reflection, its lessons spread quietly through time, not through conquest or fame, but through empathy, design, and the gentle persistence of memory. Every region after Unova borrows something from it. Kalos inherits its fascination with moral duality, beauty and destruction, sharing one heart. Alola learns from Unova's reverence for coexistence, teaching that connection between people and Pokemon is not built by rules, but by trust. Galar embraces Unova's modern rhythm, turning industrial landscapes into arenas of passion and progress. Even the Hisui of ancient times feels Unova's echo, the same balance between humanity and wilderness, progress and preservation. Unova became the quiet link that bridged myth to modernity. What makes Unova's spirit timeless is not its technology or even its legendaries, but its humanity. It's in the way a child in Nuvema looks at the horizon and dares to dream. It's in the artists who paint on the docks of Driftvale, letting the sea's rhythm guide their strokes. It's in the farmers near Mistralton who plant crops, knowing the storms will return, and in the sailors of Undella who whisper that the sea remembers every name. Unova's true treasure is the way it turns ordinary lives into poetry. Even its Pokémon embody this enduring calm. Audino's gentle ears still listen to the world's smallest sounds, a reminder that care itself is an act of strength. Braviary continues to soar above Castilia's skyline, wings stretched wide against the neon glow, freedom thriving even in the heart of civilization. And somewhere deep beneath the frozen mountains, Curem still sleeps, its silence not a curse but a promise, that emptiness too can be sacred, for it leaves space for what has yet to be born. In the halls of memory, the story of the twin dragons repeats like a prayer. It teaches that truth without ideals becomes hollow, and ideals without truth become blind. Together they form the rhythm of existence, light and shadow dancing not in conflict, but in eternal conversation. When Reshiram and Zekrom meet again in myth, they do not clash. They circle each other like halves of the same heartbeat, the air between them shimmering with understanding. It is said that if one listens closely during a storm at dawn, the thunder and flame that follow are not warnings, but greetings. The design philosophy of Unova's creators was simple yet profound, to make a world that felt aware of itself. Every bridge, street, and melody was shaped with reflection in mind, a mirror held up to the player. The goal was not to impress, but to evoke, to create the feeling of remembering something you never lived. That's why its cities feel familiar, why its forests feel haunted, not by ghosts, but by thought. The region breathes in sync with whoever explores it, teaching that exploration is also introspection. The developers once said in an interview that Unova represented the moment when Pokémon realized it had grown up. That sentiment extends beyond narrative. The mechanics, the pacing, the emotional tone, all slowed into contemplation. Gone was the innocence of discovery. In its place came empathy, dialogue, and reflection. Even the rivalries became discussions rather than battles. Unova showed that the world didn't have to end in fire or rebirth. Sometimes it simply needed to rest. The visual language of Unova reinforces this harmony. The blues of its ocean fade gently into gold at dusk. The buildings of Castilia reflect the stars as if trying to return them to the sky, and the glow of Opelucid's lights forms constellations when seen from afar. Every shade, every particle of light is deliberate. The color palette was designed to fade gently into memory. No scene ever ends abruptly, it always dissolves. It's a visual lullaby. The final lines of the Unova Pokédex, translated from developer notes, read, "Every world exists in reflection. The world you see is the one you create." That single phrase became the region's hidden philosophy, that existence is participatory. The stories of trainers, Pokémon, and the land itself are incomplete without each other. When the player leaves the game, Unova doesn't stop. It keeps breathing in imagination. Its skies remain blue somewhere, its rivers still flowing, its forests still filled with quiet song. For players who return years later, the nostalgia carries an almost sacred softness. They notice things they didn't before, the way a certain melody sounds like a lullaby, the way light bends across the Sky Arrow Bridge, or how N's castle, though empty, still feels alive. The region doesn't greet them with spectacle, but with stillness, like an old friend smiling quietly. That gentleness is Unova's greatest accomplishment. It welcomes memory without demanding attention. Across the wider Pokemon universe, Unova's influence manifests in subtle ways. The dream world's concept of shared imagination evolves into new forms: online spaces, connectivity features, and cooperative exploration, each one a spiritual descendant of that early dream. The themes of unity and coexistence inspire later stories, from the islands of Alola to the interconnected ecosystems of Paldea. Even the idea of conflicting philosophies living in balance becomes a recurring thread carried forward by regions yet to come. But for all its cultural and design significance, Unova's heart remains personal. It is the region that invites you to slow down, to watch the sunset in Nimbasa's amusement park, to stand beneath the glowing stones of Chargestone Cave and listen to their hum, to walk through snow on Route 7 and hear nothing but the whisper of your own steps. Its magic lies not in its grandeur, but in its quiet, the rare stillness that lets you feel connected to everything around you. The legacy of its people lives on too. Bianca, once shy and uncertain, grows into a mentor who sees the world with gratitude. Charon, who once sought strength, becomes a teacher who values understanding above victory. Even the nameless NPCs, the street artists, the gardeners, the ferry captains, continue their routines with a kind of meditative purpose. Unova's world doesn't revolve around the player. It breathes independently, confident in its rhythm, and perhaps that's why it endures. Unova doesn't ask to be remembered as the loudest or the grandest. It asks to be felt, like a favorite song you hum without realizing, or a scent that reminds you of someplace warm. It represents growth through gentleness, power through empathy, and strength through listening. As the camera pans one last time across its skyline, the ocean beneath reflects the final traces of sunlight. The fairies drift like stars on water, the wind carries faint echoes of flute music, and the horizon glows between gold and violet, colors that never fully fade into night. Somewhere beyond that line, another region waits, another journey begins. But Unova's light remains, quiet and steady, a lantern guiding every traveler who has ever paused long enough to notice the beauty in stillness. And in that stillness, under the hum of the world and the hush of the sea, Unova dreams, not of war or wonder, but of connection. The truth and ideals that once divided it now rest together, like open palms cupping a flame that never goes out. Its story, like every life it touched, doesn't end. It simply exhales, content beneath the stars, reminding the world that even the brightest adventures are, at their heart, a way of finding peace.